there's no doubt that there are women that are not feeling well. They do have symptoms, but the question is, what's causing that? You know, is it actually the implant or something unrelated to the implant that's just the implant's a confounding variable?
I believe that it's a real thing, but I think the challenge is figuring out who it's going to happen to and why it happens, and really trying to, I think, separate a lot of the hype from the actual science that's now out there.
At first I thought these women were all crazy, but then a lot of them got better when we took their implants out. So we were like, okay, what's missing here?
This has expanded to not just very basic, low-level research. It's really expanded into high-level, very complicated research that no one was doing before.
It's also a huge rabbit hole that somebody can get led down that's just rubbish.
There's too much fear. We're here for the facts, bro.
This is not rumor or myth. This is the real deal.
There's science behind every choice, but the science doesn't lie.
To be honest, it's a full throttle clinic day.
No question is too tough. We will tackle it all.
You want the truth? We're bringing it to you right here on TBH.
Hello, Full Throttle Doc audience. Welcome to Media PSC Command Central in episode 5 of TBH Breast Implants. Right here on TBH, you will get straight talk on real breast implant hot topics and trends. Today's episode is the curious tale of the breast implant pocket. We'll also be introducing a brand new TBH segment called the Scrub Scene, and the great Dr. Tony Youn will be joining us to provide some great insights. With me to help lead TBH is renowned plastic surgeon, educator, and innovator, Dr. Rohrich. Rod, this is going to be a great show, don't you think?
Absolutely. I can't wait for the scrub sink. And Tony will add some amazing
It's a new
insight.
segment, new segment. We're on the cutting edge with TBH. We got to keep going, but we've got some great experts tonight. So let's get in and meet them. Let's meet the great Dr. Pat McGuire.
Straight from Missouri, the Show Me State, comes a surgeon who doesn't just talk results, she shows them. She's a leader who's built her career on dedication, data, and doing what's right. She's president of the Aesthetic Foundation, the research and education arm of the Aesthetic Society, and the principal investigator of the landmark ASERF Systemic Systems Biospecimen Study, the first prospective blinded controlled study to explore systemic symptoms in women with implants, redefining safety standards across the world and earning global recognition and accolades for this impressive work. From earning her medical degree at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, to completing a general surgery residency at Washington University and plastic surgery training at St. Louis University, her Missouri roots run deep. For 3 decades, she's led Parkcrest Plastic Surgery in St. Louis, while shaping future surgeons as a clinical instructor at Washington University. Known for her hands-on teaching and live surgical education, she's as committed to mentoring as she is to mastery. Globally respected, she chairs the Breast Emergency Response Task Force and serves as section editor for the Aesthetic Journal. Among her many honors, it's the Patient Safety Award she shares with respected colleagues that she holds closest to her heart. Sharp, compassionate, unstoppable. She is leadership in motion. We're thrilled to welcome to TBH, Dr. Pat McGuire.
Pat, thanks so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm good.
That's so
Just got a meeting in Brazil.
Yeah, you've been traveling as usual. Caroline Glicksman, great friend of all of ours, was just on the last episode of TBH. And what I said, I almost feel the same about you, Pat. My career in plastic surgery, I feel like you've been my sister in that journey. Mm-hmm. You're a great educator. We've been to a lot of meetings together. I think we've always had good times together, but we've lived through some crazy times and also some great times. So yeah, it's congratulations on all your accomplishments, and just those are just a few that we could fit in.
We met on a Viking cruise in Stockholm, Sweden, in 26 years ago.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
That's right. And now you're the Aesthetic Foundation president, doing a great job, and we're going to be talking about that.
You bet. Kudos to you for giving back. Fantastic.
Yeah, you got to get back, as Dr. Rohrich always says. So, all right. Well, let's meet our second expert. Last but not least, let's meet the professor, Dr. David Sieber.
In San Francisco, precision meets purpose. That's where we find our next guest, who's dedicated to creating results that look real and feel like you. A graduate of Loyola University School of Medicine, he completed his general surgery residency at Loyola University Medical Center, followed by plastic and reconstructive surgery at the University of Minnesota. He advanced his skills through an elite aesthetic fellowship at the University of Texas Southwestern in Dallas, training with the best of the best in breast surgery. Today, at his private practice in the Bay Area, he's known for his precision in breast augmentation and revision, and detail and complex reconstruction, combining technical mastery with deep understanding of proportion, balance, and natural outcomes. A respected educator and researcher, he serves on the Aesthetic Surgery Education and Research Foundation board and has authored over 40 peer-reviewed publications and multiple book chapters on aesthetic surgery. Beyond the OR, his passion for care reaches far beyond borders, volunteering his surgical skills in Nepal, Peru, and Armenia, bringing healing to communities in need. TBH welcomes a surgeon who believes that excellence always begins with the best care. Dr. Dave Sieber.
Dave, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Great.
We're doing great. We know that you're fresh back from a long trip, which is it's not strange to you, I know, because you're going around everywhere educating. You're a fantastic educator. You know, Dave Rod was actually one of my first fellows once I became program director of our aesthetic fellowship, and you know, just what an incredible talent. You know, Dave, it's such a fun year. I remember just thinking to myself, like, this is what it's all about, you know, like working with people as smart and talented as you, and then seeing you know, be growing to the educator, you know, that you are today. It's been, you make us proud.
Yep.
Thank you.
Every day, man. Keep it up.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, we've got a great group. We got really interesting topics today. I think it's going to be awesome. So we're going to get on with things. I want to say thanks to all of our sponsors. We couldn't do it without them. And a special shout out to Allergan, who stepped up and led the way to make this show possible. Okay, BJ, let's get to the show. Here we go with some full throttle edutainment. But before we go full throttle, we want to hear from you. So make sure to send us your questions, like us, subscribe to the channel. You can submit questions 2 different platforms. You can go on YouTube to @the Plastic Surgery Channel, or on X @HeyDocTBH. So let's get into the first case of the day. And this case is sponsored by our friends at Mentor, who have been leaders in aesthetic and reconstructive breast surgery for many years and supported TBH and real conversations on breast implants here today. All right, so Dave, Pat, Rod, we're going to talk about the curious tale of the breast implant pocket. And it is quite a curious tale. And it starts back in the 60s when silicone breast implants were first developed by Cronin and Giroux in 1962. And the pocket plane was a subglandular pocket plane. So this you can see here in this graphic. And this is basically the breast, the regular breast. You can see that the breast tissue is here. The breast tissue is above the 2 main chest muscles, the pectoralis major and minor. And then the subglandular pocket plane was when the implant was placed behind the gland, but in front of the muscles. So this is a classic subglandular pocket plane. And subglandular pocket planes really were quite popular from 1960 to 1980, about 20 years. But over time, people started seeing some issues with the subglandular pocket plane. So there was what we call trouble in paradise. And what was that trouble, Rod? It was things like long-term soft tissue coverage. The biggest, most important factor in a breast implant procedure is to have really good, stable, long-term soft tissue coverage over the implant. And so in the subglandular pocket, we saw problems like this, where there was just poor soft tissue coverage over the implant, deformities. It just didn't look good. And sometimes these things don't come up initially. They're fine for 2, 3, 4 years, but 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road, they started to surface. So these are problematic. And so surgeons began to evolve. They began to move away from the subglandular pocket, and the traditional subpectoral pocket was developed, where the implant was just placed under the pectoralis major muscle. And this is just shown here. This shows the subglandular pocket, again, implant under just the breast gland on top of the muscle. And you can see here, the traditional subpectoral pocket was just placing that implant under the muscle. So none of the muscle was cut or divided. So you can see the muscle completely covers the implant, except for a little bit of the lateral part of that implant, which would just be, because anatomically the muscle is not all the way out to the lateral chest wall. That was a good advancement. Soft tissue coverage long-term was better, but there were other problems with the traditional subpectoral pocket, and there's superior malposition, lateral malposition, more movement on animation of the muscle. And in the early 2000s, a real breakthrough came through, and this was originally described by Tebbets. It was the dual plane pocket. So the dual plane pocket was, you can see here in this picture, in the middle, again, is the traditional subpectoral pocket. But in the dual plane pocket, you divided the inferior origin of the pectoralis major muscle. So you basically kind of had the best of both worlds. You had a subglandular implant in the lower pole of the breast, and then you had a subpectoral implant in the upper part of the breast. And that really gave much better long-term coverage over time. And this shows the power of a dual plane, or just adding soft tissue over the implant. So you can see here, this is a patient with a subglandular implant. This is after over 10 years. So you can see how thin that tissue is. You can see the rippling of the device and the implant. And you can say, just by converting them to a dual plane pocket, that rippling and issues with poor soft tissue coverage are basically eliminated. And so dual plane pocket really was the lion's share of pocket planes, especially here in the United States for many years. And there's still a small faction of people doing subglandular, but not that much. And then all of a sudden, in about 5, 6 years ago, this really probably is popularized out of South America. There was an implant pocket plane called the subfascial pocket plane. And this is why it's a curious story, because it's almost history repeating itself. And I equate the subfascial pocket plane to Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. I think Rod and Dave and Pat, you guys remember Pabst Blue Ribbon. I mean, I went to college up in the Northeast. We had these beers like Genesee Cream Ale, Schmidt, Schaefer, Hams, and Pabst Blue Ribbon, all of which were complete rubbish. I mean, you barely had to hold your nose to drink these things. They were so bad. Over time, Pabst Blue Ribbon went out of business, probably because it was so bad. But eventually, it resurrected. And what happened was somebody decided to resurrect it, change the can, and market it to the hipster culture and generation. And so the hipster generation was told, hey, this is a newer beer. It was really the same beer. There's nothing changed about the recipe of the beer. But the hipster generation perceived it as being different. And so it continues on today. I still, for the record, don't drink it. But that's where we are here now. This is the landscape. And again, history does repeat itself. Yes. Sometimes it's been said, history repeats itself. First time as a tragedy, second time as a farce. And we'll get into this. So we went straight to the source. We got to go to the source, of course, social media. So we've got some really good clips. There are different opinions about these pocket planes, Dave and Pat. I want you all to look at this, and then we'll have a little discussion. So let's look at these 2 clips.
Primarily only do subglandular implant placement. So subglandular, a lot of benefits. You have a more natural look because it's closer to your breast tissue. It's right under the gland. It is less pain, lower downtime, no animation deformity. With submuscular, you get animation deformity. And with the new generation implants, you don't have an issue with visibility of the breast implant rippling. Also, there was some thoughts that subglandular implants have a higher rate of something called capsular contracture, which is true in the older literature. But with the new generation implants, is not the case. Submuscular, higher chance of animation deformity. It's less anatomic. Why would you place an implant below the muscle when you were trying to revolumize the breast? That's a basic plastic surgery principle.
And here's the second clip.
The two main pockets are the submuscular pocket, which is under the muscle, or the subglandular pocket, which is between the breast tissue and the muscle. For many years, we only had saline implants that we had access to, and these were placed almost exclusively in the submuscular pocket due to visibility concerns because of the liquid consistency of the saline implant. When silicone came back in 2007, 2008, we did start putting more percentage-wise of the silicones above the muscle, but there were some issues with that, and for that reason, really saline and silicone, at least in my practice, goes almost exclusively in the submuscular position. There's no disturbance of the overlying breast tissue, so for future mammograms and breast imaging, it doesn't cause any disturbances.
The fascia that covers the pectoralis major muscle is thin and flimsy. Surgeons that advocate for subfascial claim that their rates are just as good without any other associated issues with subpectorally placed implants, specifically mostly implant motion. That has yet to be determined. Once again, placing an implant in the subfascial position affords no additional tissue coverage of a breast implant. Breast implants look and feel better with more tissue covering them. I really am not convinced that subfascial is anything distinctly better. At this point in time, subpectoral implants have the lowest rates of capsular contracture, have the most tissue covering them, and when an appropriately sized implant is placed, implant mobility or motion due to muscle contraction is minimal.
All right, so Dave, I want to start with you. I know you talked about this subject a ton, but I mean, what's your perspective on this curious story about pocket plane?
I mean, I think there's some truth to it. I mean, when they were talking about animation deformity, I mean, we can't argue that there's no animation deformity with an implant that's underneath the muscle. So, I'll give everyone that one point. But, I see lots of patients who've had these long-standing subglandular implants, and really the only thing they get long-term with it is soft tissue stretch. We had one of the breast and body meetings a couple years ago where Bill and Steve Sigalov presented their cases, and Bill was totally dual plane, and Steve was showing his cases where it was basically a subfascial aug with a total Galaflex wrap. And I think if you're doing something like that, then you can have equivalent results. But a lot of this other stuff, I just don't know that I'm fully on board for what they're saying, especially with animation deformity. I mean, having done thousands of breast augmentations, do my patients have animation deformity? Sure, probably a little bit, but I've never, ever had a single patient come back and complain and want me to put it above the muscle to get rid of the animation deformity.
Pat, what's your position on animation versus pocket plane?
Yeah, I've done all of these. I was in residency in the 80s where we put all the implants subglandular. Then we did total muscle coverage in the 90s, then dual plane in the early 2000s. It depends on the patient. I will do both. I do for my transgender patients who have very thick muscles. I do tend to put those subfascial. They have very good soft tissue coverage, and because their tissues are a little bit thicker. And I've seen much less displacement and much better expansion of the lower pole. So I think the answer is it depends. Animation is an issue. There was a paper that John Kim and Megan Fracall published in, I think, 2021, where 40% of breast reconstruction patients were significantly bothered by animation deformity. And 75% of primary augmentation patients said they wish they'd been told about it so they could plan for it. So I think the main concern I have with subglandular subfascial placement is imaging. You have a concern they can't do the displacement for mammograms. So I won't do a subfascial placement for a patient with any concern about breast cancer. And there's a difference between subfascial and subglandular. Well, Ruth Graff, who I just saw when I was in Brazil, did a prospective blinded study, subglandular versus subfascial. The patients didn't know whether they had either one. And they did found that the subfascial placement had lower capsular contracture rates, lower visible wrinkling and rippling, and significantly better results. So is there something to it? I think the answer is always like every patient is, it depends. If you pick the right patient, put the right implant in, you can get a good result. And I did 99.9% dual plane. Now I do probably 30% subfascial. And I see a lot of these CrossFit girls, that really exercises where they are really bothered by animation.
Yeah, I mean, so I would push back just a little bit because I think that, first of all, I'm glad you did mention, I think transgender is a recognized group of patients that may do better on top of the muscle for the reasons you articulated.
Body lifter,
But the two things, like, first of all, Dave, I mean, this probably, you've seen this. If you have a subglandular implant or a subfascial implant and you contract your muscle, the breast moves. The problem is that people call animation deformity, but they're not equating what are they doing on their submuscular pocket plane. If you're doing, I see people that do a traditional subpectoral pocket, like they don't divide the inferior origin. And then they go, oh, look at all this animation. Well, you're not doing a dual plane. They call it dual plane. So if you don't know how to do a proper dual plane, and then you say it causes animation deformity, well, the problem is not the pocket plane. It's actually the execution of it. And I see, I don't know what your experience is, but I see three things that are done that cause problems. They overdivide the muscle,
right. They
underdivide the muscle, or they take the muscle off the chest wall. And those three things cause issues.
Right. No, I agree entirely. And the one point is that the capsular contracture is less with it below the muscle. I think that's been well established. But I think all those other points are very valid, and it just depends. I think, like Pat said, depends on the patient. But in general, the science would lean towards doing it more in the submuscle subpectoral plane.
Dave, which this came up in those videos. Which pocket plane gives the most natural look long term? Do you think?
I mean, I'm still a partial to the dual plane pocket. I mean, even when I look at some of the surgeons' results online, whether that's in social media or whatever, they'll have patients in a push-up bra or bikini, and the upper pole of the implant is still just very, very visible. Here in San Francisco, everyone still wants to have a very natural result after surgery. And, I've talked to some of them about putting it above the muscle in a subfascial plane, and they don't want it there. They'd rather have it in a dual plane so that it gives more coverage of the upper pole of the implant. And then when it comes to rippling, when you have really thin patients, I don't care what type of implant you use or what the cohesivity of the implant is that you use, rippling really is a soft tissue coverage problem. So if there's no soft tissue to cover the implant, you're always going to have a problem.
You'll hear people say, well, with modern Generation 6 breast implants, oh, you don't get rippling. But what do you think?
Well, the answer is it depends. It all depends on the tissues. It depends on the pocket, the amount of soft tissue covering. We were all influenced by John Tebbets, who his most important thing was soft tissue coverage of an implant. And when are you going to get better soft tissue coverage with an implant under the muscle? But you have some patients that have good tissues that don't want the movement of the muscle. They don't want changes in the chest wall anatomy. That can do fine with an implant under the muscle. You just have to be very careful not to oversize that implant and put too much weight into the tissues.
The truth is that there is no implant that can replace adequate soft tissue coverage, and that's certainly, I think, what I take away of that whole tale of the breast implant pocket is it doesn't really matter. You can have the most modern implant made. There's some very good implants. We've detailed these in previous episodes, but they're not going to prevent rippling and soft tissue coverage issues if your coverage is poor. Right. And you can just see that time and time again. Briefly to the capsular contracture question, that comes up. So what's your insights about capsular contracture, say dual plane versus subfascial?
Yeah, historically, it's always been that there were lower capsular contracture rates, dual plane versus subglandular. Now, with newer techniques, with newer implants, the capsular contracture rates have gone way down. And a lot of that comes from the research that you did, what you've taught us all about mitigation of bacterial contamination in pockets. So the capsular contracture has become much less of a problem than it was. Mm-hmm. Now, the more current studies will show capsular contracture rates below the muscle, less than 1% or less, above the muscle, maybe 2 to 3%. But it's not the 20% versus 10% that it was even 10, 15 years ago. So it's, I think it is still lower under the muscle, but it's not as big a problem as it used to be.
There actually is a very interesting study out of Argentina. It was published in 2022, and they were originally looking at smooth versus texture, but also within that data set, they have submuscular versus subfascial. And actually in that data set, same surgeons, it was a 10 times lower contracture rate, albeit low, they were lower, 10 times lower in the submuscular dual plane pocket versus subglandular or subfascial. So, and it's actually quite a good study. Louis Strauch always reminds me of that. It's a great study if you guys want to look at it sometime. All right, well, let's go to our Sew It Up. Let's go to question number 3, because I think we've kind of talked about this, but Dave, I just want you to get into specifics on this. So it's what is the most common etiology of animation deformity, and what pitfalls should plastic surgeons be aware of to avoid during dual plane breast augmentation? So you've done a lot of this, Dave. So what are your key pearls you tell people?
No, I think you talked about this already. I really think animation deformity is from over dissection or under dissection of the muscle. Because if you think about it, if you don't dissect the muscle all the way to the sternal attachments, you're basically in a submuscular plane, which is going to have, very aggressive animation. And then if you're taking the muscle all the way off the sternum, again, you're going to have just an overly aggressive muscle contraction causing animation. I think when it's done properly, just like you said, there is still some movement, but I don't think it's nearly as much as when the muscle is not released properly.
Yeah. Let's do question number 1. Pat, this is for you. This is funny. So it says, is subglandular placement actually more natural, or is that one of the biggest myths in breast augmentation?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. The breast doesn't naturally exist underneath the pectoralis muscle, which is kind of how the prepectoral breast reconstruction has become the major way that they're being done. But it depends on what you mean. If you don't want to see an implant, if you want to not feel or see edges more, is it more natural if that implant is under the muscle than above? And again, as I said before, it all depends. Every patient has to be looked at individually, and what for her lifestyle, for her tissues, for her goals, you have to see. I've had women plastic surgeons come to me and wanted their implants moved from below to above the muscle because of discomfort, because of difficulty with some activities. So the answer is it just depends on the patient with it. Is it more natural? Is it less natural? Well, if you're putting something in someone's body that doesn't belong there, so, decide which of that's more natural or not.
Yeah, I think I'd add to what you just articulated is that people say, well, it'd be more natural to put it on top of the muscle because that's where the breast tissue is. But let me tell you something. The minute you went to a prosthesis, that isn't natural anymore.
That's right.
So
that's not natural.
That's a little bit. That's a bit of a misnomer too. All right, our last one. Let's go to question number 5, Cam. Dave, this is interesting. So what he's asking is, are there indications for either subfascial or total submuscular, like some of the pocket planes that kind of not many people are doing anymore, I don't think. But do you think, I mean, I think Pat mentioned, so for example, a transgender patient may be a patient for subglandular or subfascial. What do you think in terms of total submuscular or traditional subpectoral pocket? Is there anybody that you think is a good candidate for that?
I mean, I know that Holly's doing these with their mastopexy to keep the implant really, really high. It's just a different aesthetic look to have the implants in a total submuscular pocket that I think most women in the United States don't really want. I mean, if you look at South America, places like Brazil, they also like that look where the implant almost looks like it has a capsular contracture. But here, I don't really think there's any indication for a total submuscular implant.
Yeah, it's like driving a Model T,
Right.
It's out of date and obsolete. All right, well, we have an exciting new segment coming up right here, Rod. This is our new segment called The Scrub Sink. So this is a topic where we invite a really excellent guest expert, and we have the great Dr. Tony Youn with us. Tony, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. And Tony is well known. I think, Tony, you may be from Detroit, Michigan, right? And you're a Lions fan, I'm sure. It was a tough game last night, but you guys are going to do well.
Yeah. You guys have a great team.
Well, and my son goes to Michigan, so he and Rod have a big connection there. My daughter's hoping to go there too. We'll see.
That's great. Well, so Tony, do you think you think maybe you're the first real plastic surgeon to build a YouTube presence?
Probably. I started doing YouTube back in like 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
And I had this video that went viral that was I literally wrote it while I was flying on a plane. And it was like on a napkin, and I made this video. I didn't edit it or anything, just posted it, and I think it's up over 10 million views now. And it was what not to put on your face. And the number one, and so I counted down like 5 things not to put on your face. And the number one was, I don't know if I can say it, but basically a male's, discharge. and it went viral and just kind of went nuts. And it just kind of taught me the power of YouTube. And one day I was watching TV with my kids, and they're just watching YouTube. And I was like, well, why don't you turn on cable? Like, we pay for cable and all this. They're like, no, we just want to watch YouTube. And I thought, oh my gosh, like that's what the kids are going to be watching. That's what the young people will be watching. And so that's why I really got involved.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you do a fantastic job.
Amazing.
Rod and I always talk about you because look, this is Tony did this is a great segment, and we always are trying to, dovetail on to some of the cool things that you've talked about. So congratulations on doing such a great job of that. You've done a lot of segments. Some of these segments that you've done are on this big topic in our specialty, as you know, systemic symptoms of breast implants, or people call that breast implant illness, aka BII. So, we're talking a little bit more about that later in the show with some of Pat's research, but there's it's a kind of a nebulous area because there's a lot of people with many different opinions. But one of the things you've touched on, kind of on the data and what's out there, is this idea that a potential etiology is bacteria as a driver for women with systemic symptoms with breast implants. So, I think just to start off, like what have you learned about this, and what's your perspective on that specific topic?
Yeah, so I mean, with the breast implant illness, the SSBI issue, I was one of the early, I think, surgeons to come out publicly to say, I think there's something here. And for a while, I was pretty vocal about it. But what's been happening, I think, the last couple of years, and I really credit Dr. McGuire, I credit Carolyn as well, and all the other ones that are putting in research. It used to be that I started noticing that I was having patients who were coming to see me, and they say, hey, look, I've been on these websites, and I've got these symptoms. I think I might have, my implants may be making me sick. And so we would take the implants out, and a high percentage of them would be getting better. And the issue that we had back then is we didn't have a whole lot of research on it. And I credit really the societies and all of the researchers now for actually getting us real data, which has been huge. And so I personally, I still believe that it's a real thing, but I think the challenge is figuring out who it's going to happen to and why it happens, and really trying to, I think, separate a lot of the hype from the actual science that's now out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's some great points, and it certainly is an evolving topic. Pat, I know you know a ton about this, probably more than any of us, but kind of where are you on that topic of bacteria as a driver for a potential disease with women with breast implants?
Yeah, I'm kind of like Tony, where I thought these women were all crazy, but then a lot of them got better when we took their implants out. So we were like, okay, what's missing here? There's something going on. And the literature was terrible. It was all case reports and case series with no science. So we did a study where we did a prospective blinded study where we cultured the surface of the implant capsules, and we didn't culture, we sent it for bacterial and fungal DNA analysis. And we found 48% of the patients did have positive PCR, mainly for Staph epi and Cutibacterium, but so did 46% of our control group. What I've been seeing a lot lately on some of the social media from some of these so-called explant experts is that, 36% of their patients have positive PCR. They don't have a control. And this is bacteria that normally live in the body. I will say we hoped it was going to be a biofilm because that would have been an easily correctable thing.
Yeah, it's as you guys know, I'm like a big lover of bacteria and that sort of thing. So, to me, it definitely has evolved because, 5 years ago, I think there was a lot of enthusiasm that bacteria could play a role. But I think as the data has come out, there's certainly other things that have come up that certainly have more stringent and good data behind them to support that. So I don't know too many recent studies, at least, that implicate bacteria.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I guess the question I have for all of you is, how long do these symptoms improve after removal of the implant? I know, Pat, you discussed it, and I know, Tony, you've discussed it as well on some of your YouTube channels. And Bill and I actually did a very small study in 1998 where we actually saw that they did get better transiently for 6 to 12 months, and then the symptoms seemed to come back in a certain subset of patients. What have you found?
What I tell my patients is that about the first 2 weeks, most people will see significant improvement if you're going to see improvement at all. Right. And then it does kind of peter out after that. I think after a month, it's not a whole lot of improvement that we see. Like what they seem to have at about a month to 2 months is what they're going to have. And what I tell patients, and this I think also is consistent with the literature, is if they come in and they have been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, they've got lupus, they've got rheumatoid, they have something already going on, the chances of them improving if we take their implants out is extremely low. If, however, they were previously healthy, they have implants put in, and then within the first really 12 to 24 months, they start developing symptoms, their doctor can't figure out what's going on, they've had a full workup by their physician. Then I tell them that, there is a decent chance, studies show around probably an average of 65 to 85% chance that they'll have significant improvement in their symptoms. But I also tell them, I don't know why. We don't know why. There's a lot of potential factors, but that seems like what we're seeing in my practice.
Dave, you had a comment, I think?
I was going to just comment how, Pat was saying how soon before they get better. And you see some videos of women in the recovery room stating that, their eyes are brighter, that they have more energy. And, I just don't see how that's possible. But I think Pat and Tony brought up a lot of really good, relevant points.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end, we're still gathering data and looking at this, but there's more and more really good data now. And I know, Pat, you're going to present some later, but at the end of the day, there's no doubt that there are women that are not feeling well. They do have symptoms, but the question is, what's causing that? And is it actually the implant or something unrelated to the implant that's just the implant's a confounding variable? So that's ultimately what we're all trying to sort out.
Right.
Yeah, what you hear a lot is people say, "Oh, is it real?" Well, of course it is. These women have real symptoms. They're not hypochondriacs. They're not making this stuff up. And when they get to us, they're frightened because nobody can tell them what's going on. And I think to a degree, we did this all to ourselves because a lot of people blew these women off and you didn't listen to them. And so I think, it's important to listen to them, talk to them, and see, what what is. So this is a real thing. The question is, what causes it? And that's what we have been spent the last 6 years trying to do.
Yeah. All right, Tony, you're going to have the last word. Where do we go from here?
I think, I was one of the early people talking about this, but I've been less talking about it as Dr. McGuire has been putting out more and more research. I really commend the societies for, really putting funding into this, because just like she said just a minute ago, I think that we put ourselves in this position by not listening to patients. I've had so many patients who have told me, I saw this other doctor, they said that I was crazy, I need to see a psychiatrist. I just want somebody to listen to me and help me. And I think that's what we want, right? That's what we want.
Right.
We're here to take care of patients and to listen to them and to treat them with respect and to hopefully help them get better.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great stuff. And, Tony,
Wise words.
Your insights have been fantastic. Really appreciate you coming on. We hope you'll come back again sometime. Go Lions.
Anytime.
Go Blue.
Go blue.
Go blue.
Go blue. All right.
Beat the Buckeyes.
Oh, yes. Oh, God. Yes.
No, it's gonna be full throttle.
Thanks, you guys.
All right. See you,
care.
Tony.
You bet. Thank
you.
you so much, Tony.
Okay, that was great stuff. We're going to head to the second case of the day. All right, so we're going to talk in the second case about evidence leads the way. So we have some great things to talk about in this. It really gets down to this concept, evidence-based medicine. What is that? Rod, you taught me about evidence-based medicine, but it's the conscientious, explicit, judicious use of current best evidence in making decisions about the care of individual patients. And how do you get that? Well, you get that through good high-level research, publications, really the academic scientific method. So in plastic surgery, there's a couple organizations that really strive to produce evidence-based research in plastic surgery. So you have the Aesthetic Foundation, which is the research foundation of the Aesthetic Society, and you have the Plastic Surgery Foundation, which is the research foundation of ASPS. And interestingly, we have two super full throttle leaders in ASF, Aesthetic Foundation. So Dr. Pat McGuire is the current president of ASF, and Dr. Sieber is the upcoming president-elect. So Pat and then Dave's tell us more about ASF and why it's so great.
Yeah, I had my 40th medical school reunion in March. And if you had told me 40 years ago when I graduated from medical school that I was going to be the president of the research foundation of the Aesthetic Society, I never would have believed it. I didn't do research in medical school. It wasn't required. I didn't do it as a resident. And so how did I end up getting into this? Well, a lot of this I can blame on Bill, because he's the one who kind of drugged me into doing studies. And I did some of the FDA studies for some of the implant companies. And then Bill and I started talking about the breast implant illness things. And how do you solve a problem? Well, it has to be with facts. And the study that we did for systemic symptoms associated with breast implants cost $300,000. Then where does that money come from? We did not want it to come from industry because we didn't want to look like we were shills for industry on this. So that we went to the Aesthetic Foundation. And at the time, I was on some committees for the foundation, but didn't know about it. Well, after I completed the study and was published, I was just in Brazil, and they were telling me how our research has affected their practice. Every meeting I go to, people stop and thank us for what we have done. And that's when it really hit me how important research is in aesthetic surgery. And it sounds crazy. Now, this is all cosmetic surgery, it's whatever. Well, it's not. We do research on a lot of things that affects our patients. It's just as important for us to have scientific data on every procedure that's being done. And that's when I moved up and got into leadership for the Aesthetic Foundation. And we right now have 30 ongoing studies. Last year, we funded studies with $300,000 in grants. So and not only do we do that, we also have a fund for helping breast cancer patients. We have an externship program where we match students from medical schools that don't have plastic surgery programs with plastic surgeon mentors. So it's a broad topic, what we do. And research is really the heart of it.
You know what, Pat? I want to just say something. You know why you're the president of the foundation? It's because you listen to your patients. I thought when you were talking to Tony, that's so true. And then, of course, there's Bill, who recognizes talent. And just like I recognize talent when I chose Bill to be on our faculty. And really, you listen to your patients. You're a good doctor, and that makes us all proud. And I thank you enough for doing that research, because it was out there for so many years, but nobody wanted to touch it.
Yeah, I second that for sure. And Pat, you've had a good second lieutenant kind of at your side with Dave. Dave, like what do we have in store next year when you take the helm?
Well, I think a lot of people don't even know what the foundation does. I don't think they know that it exists. But, I first got involved with this when I was at the University of Minnesota, and Dr. Joe was the chair of the research grant committee. And I said I wanted to get more involved, and he got me in there. And I didn't really realize how many papers are being submitted and funded to really expand and excel aesthetic research. I mean, you think of reconstructive stuff, you think of other types of scientific research and how important it is. And I'm just so proud to be a part of the society that is really focused on doing aesthetic research. And, we're able to produce papers like the ones that Pat and Caroline wrote, and all sorts of other studies really giving us hard science to support what we're doing. Not just saying, well, I, washed my pocket out with this because that's how I was trained, but we actually have science to support everything now.
Yeah, I mean, the foundation is great. I was in 2014. I was president of, it was ASERF, not ASF, but I was always drawn towards kind of the mission of ASERF. And ASERF was much smaller. It's grown just from the leadership of you all, like much bigger than it was when I was president. But it was all the funds donated to ASERF went towards research that would clinically benefit its members. And I always thought that was a great charge, for a foundation. And over time, the foundation really has grown into something that's quite special and quite productive and very important to the future of plastic surgery. So
we haven't done a good job either of kind of publicizing everything that we do. And we're going to start making a point of last year, I think there were 5 papers published from aesthetic foundation funded studies. So that's one of the things I'm going to be doing, is making sure people understand everything that we've done and the ongoing studies that we have. And we have things like Marshall Caden developing a point of care test to tell whether a breast implant seroma is malignant or benign. In the research of why do women with breast implants have a lower incidence of breast cancer that Northwestern's John Kim and Megan Frakall are doing. So it's very high level research. And now we have to make sure we keep getting enough money in to do this. And the sponsors of this show, Mentor, Allergan, Sientra, have been very instrumental in helping us fund the foundation so we can keep this research out.
Yeah, and I've been involved with this for probably 12 years now. And just like Pat said, I mean, this has expanded to not just very basic, low-level research looking at, differences in implants or something. I mean, it's really expanded into high-level, very complicated research that no one was doing before. But now we're able to fund these projects to get them done, because oftentimes that's the biggest barrier, is just where am I going to get the money to start this research?
And also, it's really helped solve clinically applicable problems that plastic surgeons in practice face every day. And I think that's why the Aesthetic Foundation has really made a difference. I think more so than almost any foundation in plastic surgery, because you've looked at the problem and you've funded it. So I think Simon Fredericks and Norman Cole would be very proud of what you've done.
A stellar work on both of y'all's accord, and we look forward to the continued fruitfulness of the ASF and evidence-based research. And one of those evidence-based studies is something that we're going to hear about next from Dr. McGuire. This actually is a study, I think she alluded to it as the single largest dollar amount funded. And she's got a little summary of some of the data from that study. So Pat, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so this was a study that Caroline Glicksman, myself, and Dr. Roger Wickstrom, who's a PhD toxicologist, put together when we were trying to figure out what was going on with these patients with systemic symptoms associated with their breast implants. And this is the first prospective blinded study to follow patients with systemic symptoms they attribute to the breast implants for 2 control groups. The goal was we wanted to follow these patients after their implants were removed to see if their symptoms got better. And we had women with breast implant illness, women with implants without symptoms they attributed to their implants, and women undergoing cosmetic mastopexy who never had any implanted medical device. So we did symptom surveys, we used an NIH-validated patient-reported outcome measure. Then the other thing we wanted to look at was biospecimens. We looked at peripheral blood, implant capsules, and breast tissue. So we wanted to see if we could find any objective, measurable differences that could be used to make a diagnosis or to point to a cause of symptoms in these patients. So we have 4 published papers in the Aesthetic Surgery Journal on this. The first one where we showed these patients' symptoms did improve when we removed their implants through 6 months. We had 90% of patients had at least partial symptom improvement, 74% reduction in the number of symptoms. The second paper looked at heavy metals in the implant capsules, because that's what some of the social media groups really thought that it was. So we sent implant capsules, and this is where we had initially were only going, because it was so expensive, we were only going to look at like 10. And the foundation came back before I was on the board and said, no, we actually want you to look at all 22 heavy metals. So we looked at 22 heavy metals in the implant capsules of the 2 implant cohorts, plus the breast tissue of the women who never had implants. And we did find some trace levels of heavy metals in the implant capsules. When we first got the results back, said arsenic was high. We're like, oh my God, there's our answer. Well, it was higher than it was in the non-BII implant cohort, but actually ended up being even higher in the breast tissue of women who never had implants. The bottom line in that was, yes, there were some trace metals. All were well below levels, below what's considered safe for daily exposure. And there was no difference statistically in them in the long term. So that was answered one of the big questions. The third paper looked at the remaining biospecimens of peripheral blood, where we looked for antibodies to bacterial toxins. We looked at cytokines, how cells communicate with each other. We looked at inflammatory markers, CBC, thyroid function, vitamin D levels, and we found no statistically significant difference between the BII cohort and the 2 control groups. And then the capsules, we looked at the heavy metals, we looked at bacterial and fungal DNA, surface of the implant. We did not find a difference between the type, the number of bacteria, the symptoms between the patients with positive PCR and non-positive PCR, and no difference in symptom and symptom improvement between the patients who had positive or negative PCR. So we didn't find any biospecimen different. In the last paper, we looked at the 1-year data, and these patients' symptoms did improve. And then we looked at some of the patient-reported outcome measures, and what we found was very high levels of anxiety in the patients with the systemic symptoms compared to the control groups, highly statistically significantly different, and also the use of social media as their main source of medical information. So that led us to some other studies. Now, one of the important findings we had, it led us to one of our spin-off studies, was because we took some capsule out, because we did all of this analysis, we wanted to know if we get the same symptom improvement if no capsule was removed. So we did another study with the same 2 implant cohorts, prospectively following implant removal in patients self-described BII, no control. They had no other indication for capsulectomy, and they agreed to implant removal without capsulectomy. And what we found was the symptom improvement was the same whether part, all, or any capsule is removed, which is really important because now we can have an educated discussion with the patients about whether or not they need to have their capsules removed to get symptom improvement, as they're told on some of the social media groups.
Yeah, that's just, again, congratulations on a compendium of incredible high-level research. And again, as Rod, as you said, what happens is that just because somebody has an anecdotal experience, well, I want this said this, or this person self-proclaimed expert said this about it, that's not evidence-based medicine. It's not evidence-based research. What you presented, Pat, was incredible high-level data that really guides us on what next steps should be, right?
That's right. I agree. I mean, it's unparalleled in focusing on an issue and then solving it with science and peer-reviewed medicine. It's phenomenal.
So, Pat, you obviously have researched this a ton. You're an expert. You've got all this data, tons of data. So, what do you think? Why are women having symptoms? What's your best guess based on all the data that you have?
The data that we have now looks like the most likely scenario is a neuropsychiatric, a central sensitization. It's anxiety. Is it the implant caused the anxiety, chicken versus the egg, or the anxiety caused the symptoms? And that we did another psychological analysis, a paper where we were like, this is not our area of expertise. So we worked with Dr. Kate Fass, who's a PhD psychologist who specializes in medically unexplained symptoms from Australia. And we published another paper this summer where we did a prospective study of doing 10 validated psychological analysis and symptom reactions. And we found that these patients were 18 times higher to fully meet the criteria for somatic symptom disorder. Now, again, doesn't mean their symptoms are not real. It means it's of a central origin. And actually, interestingly, Steve Bresnick, who's one of the members of our board, actually did a study where he treated breast implant illness patient with cognitive behavioral therapy, and the patient's symptoms resolved without removing her implant or capsule. So we're doing a little bit more, another study looking at that to see is there a way we can do it. The other thing we're working on with Kate is if we can come up with a screening test for patients before they have implants to see who may be more at risk for this than not. And one of the big things that we heard from our patients was they didn't feel like they got enough information before they had their surgery about the potential risk of breast implants and breast implant surgery. And Bill and you and I are both working with an FDA collaborative group to try and come up with a better system for that. And I think that's what this all gets down to is education. You give patients the data before they have their surgery and let them make an educated decision so they don't all of a sudden get blindsided by seeing something online about some potential problem caused by their implants. So what is the cause? I think there are neuropsychiatric factors, but maybe there's some yet to be determined biological cause. We have 2 pilot studies we're working on now. We're trying to turn over every stone to see if we can come up with something. And we're getting to the end of those stones, but we have a couple more things in the works because I would love to find some, concrete reversible thing, but we've not found that yet.
Well, the studio audience really loves it. They're going crazy in here, Pat. It's incredible. But that's probably going to be study number 8 or 9 that you'll have. But incredible stuff. Dave, if you need some good research done, I think you know who to ask.
Yeah.
I just think that Pat and Caroline really need to be commended, not only on doing these initial studies, but in their quest to really figure this out. Right. A lot of people would have done a study or 2 and would have kind of stopped and said, oh, well, that's good. We have this information, but they haven't. I mean, they're still going. They're still trying to find more stuff to study, more answers. I mean, it's truly, truly commendable.
Yep.
If you want to get a study done, get Caroline involved because I would say I'm the idea person and she can implement anything that needs to be done. It's amazing what she can do.
Well, it takes a team, and you have an amazing team.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome stuff. And so I think what we're going to do is that means we're going to go to our Sew It Up. So that's where we're going to have some Q&A and conclusions. So we had this clip sent to us, and they said, we want your experts to discuss this. So it's a video. It's like a fast-paced video, so you have to listen. But a bunch of different points about breast implant illness, and then we'll let you guys provide some insight.
Breast implants.
Chronic inflammation.
Capsular contracture.
Immune system on overdrive.
Saline implants.
Not safe.
Silicone.
Can migrate.
MRI clear.
Still doesn't show everything.
Explant without en bloc.
Risk of residual toxins.
Autoimmune symptoms.
Check the implant.
Fatigue and brain fog.
Mitochondrial disruption.
Mystery illness.
Could be breast implant illness.
Scars.
We can heal that too.
So a lot of information there in a quick 30 seconds. But Pat, I mean, based on your studies, I think a lot of the things that were said there, again, social media, we know this from other studies, and I think even your studies, that it's a driver of information for sure, and some of it's clearly misinformation. And I think there's quite a bit of misinformation on that video clip.
Yeah, I mean, you don't kind of know where to start on some of these things with this. I mean, the idea that if you don't take the capsule out, you're leaving toxins behind. First, it was always heavy metals, and we did not find high levels of heavy metals in implant capsules. Then you said, oh, well, it had to take it out because there's bacteria in the capsules. Well, there's bacteria in the breast. I mean, if you want to get every bit of bacteria out of a breast, you'd have to do a mastectomy. Because if you take a piece of breast tissue and stain it, you're going to find bacteria, because bacteria normally lives in the breast ducts and the breast tissue. So the idea that this is, bacterial toxins in the implants and the capsules that have to be removed, we did not find that. Our no capsulectomy study showed no difference whether capsules are removed or not. Now, there are indications for capsulectomy, capsular contracture, intercapsular ruptures, any abnormality or concerns about the implant or implant capsule, textured implant concerns. So those are all reasons to do it. Now, autoimmune diseases, we do not see any direct link between autoimmune disease and breast implants. And as Tony said, when he was on, the previous studies have shown that's the least likely thing to get better is a diagnosed autoimmune disease in patients with implants.
Yeah, so Dave, what do you think about the followings? Because I think there's been some good data to say that there's actually more women with saline breast implants that report systemic symptoms or BII than silicone implants. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I don't know that I have that's a great question. I mean, I haven't really thought about that, but I can't think of a reason for why that might be. I mean, it could just be that, the women that have breast implant illness with saline implants, during the moratorium, we were only using saline implants, and they've had these for a longer amount of time. But, I don't know if that's an actual reason for why more of the women with saline implants are identified as having breast implant illness.
I think it depends on where you are. The implant that causes breast implant illness is the most popular implant in the area. I mean, One thing that we know is it's not related to the implant. In our study, 64% had saline implants. 80% were smooth implants. Most were not ruptured. We didn't see capsular contracture in the BII cohort versus the control. So, it's the most popular implant in an area. It's going to be the most common implant to have it. It's not doesn't seem to be directly related to the implant.
And Pat, in your study, so because you guys look at it up, tons of markers and things like that. So this notion, because you hear this a lot, you heard it in this clip. It's this massive amount of inflammation that's being caused by the device, and that's what's causing disease. So what did you find in your study?
We looked at CRP as the inflammatory marker, and we did not find, we found some mild and moderate elevations. We did not find high levels of inflammation. Looking at the cytokines, there were 3 that were statistically higher in the BII versus the control, IL-17, IL-13, and IL-22, which are inflammatory cytokines, but it was only in 6 subjects, and those 6 subjects all had confounding variables. They had underlying autoimmune disease. One of them reported she had Lyme disease with it. So it was only 6 out of 50 subjects. So we did not find anything. There was no difference in eosinophils, which would be an indication of an allergic reaction. There's no difference in the type of or the white blood cell types between the BII or the control. So again, we were hoping we'd find some smoking gun, and we didn't find it.
Yeah, and just like we were talking about with Tony Youn, that same thing with bacteria. If bacteria were a driver, you would see inflammation. That's like a secondary effect of bacteria, and that's a known fact, and you just are not typically seeing it. Okay, so Cam, let's go to this question number 7. We kind of touched on this, but it's a very common question, and I really want both of you to weigh in on this because it's a big problem in our specialty and for patients. So the question is, the doctor told me that I need to have an en-bloc capsulectomy to avoid heavy metals spilling into my tissues. So Pat, why don't you go first, and Dave, you follow up.
Yeah, that's the main reason we looked at heavy metals in the capsules. As I said before, we did not find higher levels of heavy metals. We did find some, but low levels. Platinum has been indicated, and we did find very low levels of platinum in 2 of 200 capsules, 1 in each cohort. So heavy metals, I think we pretty effectively ruled that out as a potential cause and the need for it. The other thing is the term en bloc is being used inappropriately. That's a cancer operation. It means to remove a tumor with a surrounding area of normal tissue. And that's not what these are being done. They're removing the capsules. And if you have breast implant associated malignancies, you need to have that done. You have to have a clear margin. For these patients, they don't need, if there's no other indication for capsulectomy, these really thin capsules, I think if you're trying to dig out a thin capsule, you may cause more inflammation by trying to do that. And what they'll say is, well, the reason you don't do it is you don't have the skills. Well, for me, I make more money if I take a capsule out than if not. So the only reason for me to tell a patient she may not need her capsule removed is because it's in her best interest. It might cause more trouble than it will help her.
Yeah, I mean, the term en-bloc capsulectomy is, Pat, we're in our breast surgery collaborative community. We had a consensus document amongst all the stakeholders, and it basically summarizes exactly as you said. En-bloc capsulectomy has specific indications, which are malignancy of the capsule, has nothing to do with anybody that needs their capsule out. As a matter of fact, you've shown with regard to somebody that thinks their implants are causing them to feel ill, they could do just as well just taking the implant out, not doing anything with the capsule. So it's a big problem, Dave. And the thing I see with it, and maybe you can comment more, but there are patients are looking for answers, and so people will say, well, there's only a certain number of people trained to do this en-bloc capsulectomy, and that's what you need. And it's a little bit of a snake oil approach to patient management.
Yeah, I mean, doing a capsulectomy is not a benign procedure. I mean, I know of surgeons in this area that have had patients with multiple pneumothoraces because they've gotten in around the lungs. It's not a totally benign procedure, and I think that Pat and Caroline's paper has done a really good job of using science to show what actually needs to be done, and that's just removing the implants. I don't have a whole lot more to add because I think Pat very well articulated why a lot of this stuff isn't true, and I think their papers have really disproven a lot of these kind of online theories that people have about it.
One thing I will say is that when I see a breast implant illness patient, we do discuss capsulectomy, and I do tell these patients is if you are going to be really worried if you don't get your capsule out, that you're not going to get better, then you may not get better. So if you're going to worry about it, then I can take your capsule out. If it's that may be part of the treatment for some of these patients if they're really gonna, because you can see when I show these patients, when I remove the implant and capsule together, you can see the relief when you show them these pictures because they're worried something's going to be left behind. They're worried that there's some thing that we don't know about yet, that they if you don't take the capsule out, they may have it. But you have to have an educated discussion with the patient about the risk and benefit. Capsulectomy triples the risk of a major complication, specifically hematomas, if it's done with it. And the other thing, I've seen significant deformities from patients that don't have a lot of breast tissue, the capsule is removed, and they can be left with some significant deformities from that. So it's a discussion you have to have. You have to have it, but these patients being told you must have it done for $50,000 is really doing a disservice to the patient. And I talk to the patient, I tell them the risk, I tell them the benefit. I respect the patient's request to have their capsules removed, but it has to be done with appropriate informed consent.
Yeah. You know what I've learned from this is that social media is not compatible with evidence-based medicine and with people that are quote-unquote influencers. So that's why programs like this and people like Tony Youn, who are real board-certified plastic surgeons that are rational and say honest things, really matter. And I think that's why we need to do more of this, because some of the segments we just heard are just so absolutely false. And
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. And yet patients come to us and they believe it.
Yes, I mean, Rod,
One of the things I think we could do to help patients is teach them how to read scientific papers. Because there's so much trash out there. There's so many journals now that you pay to have your paper published that comes up with all kinds of crazy stuff. And they look at this, well, look, this paper says this. Well, if you read it, it's not a scientifically done paper. There's no control group. It's not prospective. And I think it's useful for the public to understand how to read a scientific paper.
I agree, and I think we also should teach some plastic surgeons to read scientific papers and to understand them like we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, Rod, we talked about the last TBH. We were talking about how social media can be a great tool actually to educate.
Right, it is.
But it's a two-edged sword, and just as you articulated it, it's also a huge rabbit hole that somebody can get led down that's just rubbish. I mean, that's all you can mince words, but that's what a lot of this stuff is. And so it's tough on patients because sometimes they don't know better and they're looking for answers. So all we can do is plastic surgeons and educators is try to continue to educate and put information out there and do really high level research like Pat presented and try to move forward in a positive way. Yep. Now on to the absolute best show summary ever. This is even better than McAfee. It's time for the RJR Op Report.
Well, Bill, thanks. This TBH was probably the best science-based one I've been a part of. It's amazing. So we want to thank our sponsors, Allergan, Mentor, and Sientra. Their support makes this and all these discussions possible. So there are 3 take-home points today in this op report. Number 1, Implant Pocket planes. History teaches us lessons. The evolution of implant placement, whether it's subglandular, subfascial, or subpectoral, shows that's what's easier isn't always better. And each pocket choice affects shape, longevity, and complication rates. And most importantly, surgeons must learn from decades of outcomes, not just convenience or trends. Precision and anatomic respect always win. And number 2, as we've just seen, the importance of peer-reviewed publications and studies. Real science matters much more than social media hype. Peer-reviewed studies separate fact from marketing and ensure patient safety, reproducibility, and long-term excellence. And in a world that's full of influencers, truth in data and peer validation is how we advance plastic surgery with integrity. And the last one, and one that really was highlighted so well, Bill, by Tony as well as all of the panel, is the take-home point on breast implant illness. BII is real for those who experience it and deserves empathy, honesty, and science-based discussion, as all of us have discussed, especially Pat. Ongoing research shows multifactorial causes rather than a single diagnosis. The key is we must listen, we must support, and we must guide our patients with transparency and evidence, not fear or dismissal. And Bill, that's your RJR Op Report.
Thanks, Rod. That's great stuff. Well, that was indeed a full throttle show. Thanks to our 3 experts, Drs. McGuire, Sieber, and Youn. You guys and girls, don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. And that's why you're such great educators and you've accomplished so much in your career. So thanks for the great insights and discussion. Thanks to the Media PSC team for all that they do to make this show happen. Thanks to all of you in the audience. Keep clicking that like button. Make sure to subscribe and send us all your questions and topics you want to hear about in the future. Don't miss the next episode of TBH Breast Implants coming early New Year 2026. See you all very full throttle on the next TBH.